Hey folks, thanks for watching my video. Today I'm going to show you how I upgraded the railing on our deck from this kind of old, tired, painted 2x2 wood railing to this one that's made with round tube aluminum balusters and then pressure treated lumber that I sealed. So let's get started. The first thing I've got to do is get each section of railing out. A lot of decks are built like this where you've got a column here, like a post here, and then a post here, and you've got a section of railing between it. So that's what I'm doing, is I'm replacing each section. This is my next section here, and this is the one that I'll show you how I'm going about it. Now my railing is put in with long brads. They're using like 3-inch brads to hold these in, so they're pretty easy to knock out. You'll have to look on your particular deck. It may be that it's screwed in or something like that, so you'll have to figure out how you want to do your demolition to make sure you don't tear anything up. So since this thing is just put together with brads, all I got to do is knock it loose. Now you can see probably the brads in there. Like you can see the brads here and up in here that are holding it in. So I just knock that loose, knock the other side loose. And then do the same thing on the bottom. Where I've got brads that stick in the wood, I'll just get in there with pliers and pull them out so I've got a clean surface. My goal was to end up with a railing height that was 39.5. So what I opted to do was to leave an 1.5 inch gap in the bottom, which makes it easier to sweep off the deck. Use a 2x4 on edge, 29-inch balusters, another 2x4 on edge, and then a 2x6 on the top, and that gives me a nice flat surface for a rail top. So once you remove your old railing and then do whatever you're going to do to improve the opening, if anything, what I did was I had painted 4x4s as posts, and I wanted to get rid of all the painted surfaces on the deck, so I wrapped the 4x4s in 1x pine. I used a 1x4 on each side, and then I ripped a 1x6 on the opposite sides to 5.5, and put those around to make it look like a 6x6 post basically. And then when I'm screwing in the 2x4 railings, I'm using a long enough screw to go through the 1x and into the 4x4 post, so it's real solid and sturdy. But once you do whatever you're going to do for your opening, then you just want to measure the width where your railing's going to go. And I recommend measuring it where the top 2x4 is going to go and where the bottom 2x4 is going to go, because your post may not be completely straight. Pressure treated and any other lumber for that matter tends to move a little bit. So get your dimensions for the top and for the bottom. And then these brackets that I'm using, which I'll show you in a minute, and I'll leave links down below for all the items that I used, but these brackets that I'm using, what they say is to cut a 1/2 inch off the length of whatever the width of your opening, subtract a 1/2 inch, and then cut your 2x4 to that length. What I have found is that you really want to take about 9/16 of an inch off of it. A 1/2 inch makes it a little bit too tight. But I'll show you that down in the shop. So I'm using these kind of brackets on the ends of each rail, and they've got instructions inside the flap like so, and what they tell you is to measure the opening and subtract a 1/2 inch and cut your rails to that length. What I have found is just cutting a 1/2 inch off of, or reducing the length of these by a 1/2 inch, it leaves them just a touch long. So I cut right at 9/16 off of them. So in this particular case, my top opening was 45 7/8. So I cut this to 45 5/16, and the bottom of the opening was 45 15/16. So I cut it to 45 3/8, and then I just take them on the end and mark them top and bottom. I don't think I marked this one, but T and B or whatever, because you're not going to see the ends. So the next step is to locate your balusters, and to do that I use these little brackets or studs, and the aluminum balusters fit right down on top of them, and they take a screw down in the middle. The kind that I bought comes with the screws. They come 10 to a pack, I think 20 to a pack, so it's enough for 10 balusters. You got to look at your local code to see what the spacing on your balusters has to be, what the minimum is. In my case here, it's 3 7/8. So what I'm doing is, to make sure that my spacing is just a little bit less than that, I'm putting my balusters on 4-inch centers. So the balusters are 3/4 of an inch OD. If you do on center spacing of 4 inches, you can take 3/4 out of that, and then I'm below the local minimum. Just flip my bottom board up because I want my balusters to go on the top surface, and then the balusters are going to go on the bottom. So I'm going to set them up like this. Then what you do to make sure that you've got even spacing all the way across the rail. These are basically, let's say 45 1/4. So since I'm using 4-inch on center spacing, 45 1/4 divided by 4 only evenly goes in 11 times. So that gives you 44. I got 45 1/4. Divide that by 4, I get 11 at 4 is 44. So subtract that, I got 1 1/4. Now what you do to make sure it's even, so I've got 1 1/4 sort of left over, the remainder, right? So I'm going to add 4 to that because that's my on center spacing. That gives me 5 1/4, and then I'm going to divide that by 2, which gives me 2 5/8. 5 1/2, 1/8, 2 5/8. So that's how far away from each end I'm going to put my first baluster on both ends. And that'll give me even spacing throughout. Plus what it does is it centers all the balusters that I'm putting on the rail. That way you don't end up with like 4 inches on this end and just 1 1/4 spacing on this end. It balances the whole group. I'll start with my first measurement at 2 5/8, or my first mark. That's where my first baluster will go. And then after that, it's going to be every 4 inches. So 6 5/8, 10 5/8, 14 5/8, 18 5/8, 22 5/8, 26 5/8, and then I'm just trying to mark it roughly in the center of the width of the 2x4. 26, 30 5/8, 34 5/8, 42 5/8, and then you can double check your last one. It should be right at 2 5/8 from the end. Since this one is a touch longer, so it's right at 2 9 or 2 11/16. That's fine. That's going to be close enough. Nobody's ever going to see the difference. The other thing that I do is, just because of a little bit of difference between the top and the bottom, I measure everything from one end, and then I keep up with which end it is, so that the balusters will be level or plumb. If you have a marking gauge like so, you can use that. You can, your 2x4s or whatever lumber you're using, they should measure 1.5 inches wide. So you can set your marking gauge to 3/4. If you don't have a marking gauge, you can just go through with your tape and mark your center at 3/4 on every one of your marks. Just go down and do that on all of your marks. Now these, I guess these are about number 10s or so. I use a 3/32 bit to pilot the holes, and you just check your bit against your screw. Make sure the bit is no wider than the shank of the screw, excluding the threads, and that'll work fine. So then what I do is I just go through and I drill a pilot hole, basically, so I don't split the 2x4 on all my marks. And these are I think these are 1.25 inch screws that come with these. Yeah, 1.5 inch. So I'll generally run, you know, the bit in about 1 inch, give or take. You don't have to have one this long, but you do have to have one long enough to go down into here. So if you've just got a little short bit, you might need like a magnetic holder or something. It's a number 2 square drive on this particular one. Choose all these first. So you just put your screw down in there like that. You can do it however you want, but that's how I do it. And then these are plastic, so I don't drive them as hard as I can. I just get them good and snug because I don't want to break these studs or whatever. I don't even know what they call these things. Baluster connectors. Anyway, just go down through here, set all of these first. Then we're going to put the end caps on in a minute. Then you've got these end rails, railing connectors they call them. But they also come with screws. They're also square drive. They're a little bit longer. These are 2-inch screws. You'll see on the back, these 2 holes are countersunk. So they go in from the back into the end of the railing to hold it. And then these 3 are countersunk. That's what you screw it into to put it in place up top. In my particular case, they're going to go like this with the balusters in between. So I want the railing connectors on this way because I'm going to put a 2x6 up here. So I want, you'll notice, I think you can see that, yeah. So you've got some connector that goes below, and then the top part is open, and that's so you can put something on top of it. So you want to make sure you get them turned right if you're going to build your railings the way I'm building mine. I prefer to drill a pilot hole for these just to make sure they're not going to split. Alright, and do the same thing on the other end. And then the rails are ready to install, and we'll go back up to the deck and start putting them in. I've kept the same 2 blocks of 2x4 since I want 1.5 inch gap under the railing. You know, like right here, 2x4s are 1.5 inch thick, so give or take. So I just take a couple of them. And then I take my bottom board. So get them in your opening. And then you have to decide on your post this way how you're going to line them up. And then just the key is to just be consistent. I'm setting them 3/4 inch in from the back face of or the opposite face of the posts. You can use a square to square them up, or a level to make sure that this face is plumb. However you want to do it. Pressure treated wood is rarely straight, so most of the time you're kind of eyeballing it anyway, because it's not going to be perfectly straight in any direction. Then what I do is push them down on my spacer blocks to make sure I'm at 1.5 inches all the way across. Make sure they're as vertical as I can get them, and then I start driving screws. There's the way these brackets are. There's one hole on one side and 2 on the other, so it takes 3 screws per bracket to get it attached. Goes out of there. I take my 29-inch balusters, and these come 10 to a box. They're the same brand as the brackets and connectors I'm using. There are little ridges on the bottom part of these baluster connectors, so just set on there. You can see it'll raise up a little bit, but press it down on there and seat it like so. So slide that in. So then I'll just get it in here a little out of level and hold it in place, and then start lining these up. Kind of one at a time. May not be the greatest way of doing it, but it works for me, so whatever, I guess. Oops, too much. Like so, and then get that last one. Come on. Like that. Seat it all the way down. Then I place it this way where I want it. In my case, again, 3/4 inch off from the back face of the post, and then screw that in, and then I'm ready to put my 2x6 up on top. I've already made sure that I'm all the way down on the baluster connectors. What I tend to do when I'm screwing these in too, because there's 2 on this side and 1 on this side in the middle, is I start either at the top or the bottom. If this board is a little twisted, I'll start at the end that's closest to me, because it tends to draw it up a little bit, and then I'll go get the single on the back. I'll loosen that up a little bit so it stays straight, and then you may have to play around with what order you tighten them up in. Okay, and then we'll tighten this one up. There we go, and then that one. So now it's good and snug. So I'm going to screw the other end in, and that part will be done. This top rail lines up with the other 2 rails. This section, I just saved this section basically for last so I could record it for the video. The next thing that I do with the way I'm building this deck is I just measure here for my 2x6 piece, and then cut it, and then because the 2x6 is a touch wider than the post, I'll just cut a little angle on the corners and then flush it up on the front side. I'm just running screws into through the 2x6 into the 2x4, which leaves screw heads on the top of the rail cap. Some people don't like that. If you don't like that, what I would probably do is attach a piece of 2x2 here and then screw up from the bottom. It just doesn't matter to me if there's screw heads on the rail cap, so that's how I'm doing it. 45 7/8, so I'm going to cut that exactly to that length. I'll be back with that in just a minute. So I just cut this to length, and then just to kind of make it not a sharp edge, since this back edge hangs out a little bit past the post, I just cut that off at a 45 just to make it not as sharp, when, if you know, keep somebody from catching their finger on it. And fit it in there. Should be kind of a snug fit, but not too tight. And then I just line them up with the face of the post. Take a couple of measurements and drop my screws. So like what I'll do in this particular case is I'll just measure from the back. So that's 1.5. And I'll check it a couple of different places. It's 1.5 all the way down. So the width of a 2x4 is also 1.5. So half of the width of the 2x4 is 3/4. Add 3/4 to the 1.5 dimension that I get from the edge of this 2x6 to the face of the 2x4. That's 1.5. Add 3/4, which will put it at 2.25. That'll put me center of the 2x4 when I drive my screws. So I'm going to come 2.25 from the back edge, and then I've been spacing these screws at about 7 inches or so, about 2 inches from the end and roughly 7 inches in between. That works out all right. So about 2, and then I need to. So 2.25 puts it right there. And then 2.25 roughly right there. And I can line the tape up on those 2 marks and get it pretty much where I want them to be. So 2 plus 7 is 9. So right there, and another 7 is 16. The 7 is real arbitrary. It's just because it works out with this length, but you can line yours up how you want. Let's see. So 3 right there. One mark here. One up. Here. 1, 2. 16. So I'm using a 2.5 inch screw on these because the board is 1.5 inches thick. That gives me 1 inch of screw that goes into the 2x4. Again, I'll leave a link for these, but they're just deck screws, and they're self-drillers, so I don't pre-drill for them. You can if you want to. It's not gonna hurt a thing. And then I basically just drive them where the head's just barely below flush. You don't want to go too deep with them because then they'll hold water, and eventually that'll cause a problem. Just allow your board to soak up more water. About like that. If you get any splinters from the screw, knock them off so nobody picks up a splinter. And there you have it. Nice new railing. Looks way better than that old painted 2x2 railing. Also, it's much safer because the original railing that the builder put in was just bradded in. Granted, he used long brads, but it was still just wire bradded in. This is all screwed in. There's multiple screws holding it. It's screwed into structural members, so it's not going to go anywhere. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching my video. I appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Please also click on the subscribe button so you can catch my other videos when they come out. Thank you very much, and God bless you.